The most innocent man who ever lived received the most humiliating death sentence that Rome managed to invent. Not for crime, not for treason, not for rebellion, for telling the truth. And what happened in the following 6 hours defies everything that medicine, history, and physics know. The preparation for death began hours before the cross. In the Garden of Gethsemane, while praying, Jesus sweated blood. Luke, the physician, records the phenomenon with clinical precision. The sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. It is not metaphor. It is hematidrosis, an extremely rare medical condition that occurs under psychological stress so extreme that it ruptures the capillaries around the sweat glands. Blood pressure shoots up to dangerous levels. The tiny blood vessels break. Blood mixes with sweat and drains through the pores. Doctors have documented fewer than 100 cases in modern history, and they always precede imminent death or catastrophic trauma. When the soldiers arrived to arrest him near midnight, Jesus was physically weakened. Hematidrosis leaves the skin hypersensitive, fragile, prone to tearing with any touch. The outer layer is compromised. Any pressure causes disproportionate pain, and what would come next would be much more than touches. First, the religious trial. 6 tribunals in 12 consecutive hours without pause. They dragged Jesus between Annas, Caiaphas, the complete Sanhedrin, Pilate, Herod Antipas, and Pilate again. Without food, without water, without a minute of rest. At each change of location, violent shoves, spit in the face, fists to the kidneys. The Gospel of Mark records that they blindfolded him and began striking his face, shouting in mockery, "Prophesy, who hit you?" Closed fists hitting nose, cheekbones, eye sockets. The tissue around the eyes swells quickly with direct trauma. Vision begins to blur. Bruises form, constant throbbing pain. Pilate tried to avoid the execution. He knew Jesus was innocent. His own wife had nightmares about him and sent urgent warning, "Do not condemn this righteous man." Pilate ordered Jesus to be flogged, hoping the crowd would be satisfied seeing blood. But Roman flogging was not light punishment. It was torture mathematically calculated to leave the victim exactly 1 step from death without crossing it. The flagrum they used had a short handle of hard wood and 3 long strips of tanned leather. On each strip, irregular pieces of sharpened metal and angular fragments of sheep bone tied at the ends. When the soldier pulled the whip after each blow, the metal pieces dug deep into the skin and tore flesh as they were pulled back. The stated objective was not to mark, it was to systematically mutilate. Jewish law limited lashes to 39 strokes to avoid accidental death. Romans had no legal limit. They struck until the responsible centurion decided to stop. Modern forensic studies estimate that Jesus received between 120 and 150 strokes, methodically distributed. Each lash tore long strips of skin from the back, from the shoulders, from the lumbar region, from the buttocks, from the back of the thighs. The first 10 blows break the superficial epidermis. The following 20 tear the deep dermis. The final blows expose bright red muscle and, at some specific points, white fragments of ribs. Severe and continuous hemorrhaging. Estimated loss between 500 and 700 milliliters of blood from the flogging alone. Approximately 3 full American glasses. The body immediately enters hypovolemic shock stage 2. Blood pressure plummets dangerously. The heart races desperately, trying to compensate for the volume lost. Extremities become freezing and pale. Cold sweat covers the forehead. Uncontrollable tremors begin in the hands. After the flogging, the soldiers amused themselves. The entire battalion was summoned to the courtyard. Matthew records that the whole troop gathered. Estimate of 200 to 600 men forming a circle. They placed an old soldier's cloak over the completely lacerated back. Rough fabric immediately sticking to the open wounds, still bleeding. They braided a crown with long, hard thorns from a plant common in the Jerusalem region. probably Ziziphus spina Christi, rigid thorns 5 to 7 centimeters long, with points sharp as needles. They forced it onto Jesus' head with brutal pressure. Each thorn pierced the scalp, an extremely vascularized region that bleeds profusely with any wound. Hot blood running down the forehead, down the eyebrows, entering the already swollen eyes from the previous punches. They repeatedly struck his head with a heavy rod. Each blow pushed the thorns deeper through the skin until touching the skull bone, sharp pain radiating throughout the face. They spit in his face repeatedly. They knelt in mockery, pretending to worship him. And then they violently tore off the cloak in one motion, reopening all the back wounds that had begun minimally to coagulate during the previous minutes. More fresh hemorrhaging. Then they brought the cross. Not the complete structure, as paintings show. The permanent vertical beam, called stipes, always remained fixed at the official execution site outside the city walls. The condemned carried only the heavy horizontal beam, the patibulum, but that piece alone weighed between 35 and 65 kilograms of rough, untreated wood, full of splinters that dug into the skin. They placed the patibulum on Jesus' bare shoulders. Directly on skin without protective outer layer, directly on exposed muscle bleeding, the brutal and immediate weight pressed against the completely open back, rough wood literally scraping raw flesh without protection. They tied his arms open across the horizontal beam to ensure it would not come loose during the journey through the streets. The distance traveled between the Antonia fortress, where Pilate maintained the seat of government, to Golgotha, outside the walls, was approximately 600 to 700 meters, measured in reasonably straight line. It does not seem a significant distance, but for a man who lost more than a liter of blood in the last hours, who did not sleep all night, who did not eat since supper the previous night, who was repeatedly beaten in the face and back, each individual meter was exponentially multiplied agony. The narrow streets of Jerusalem were neither flat nor uniformly paved. Steep climbs, irregular descents, uneven stones in the Roman pavement. It was Passover season, and the city overflowed with pilgrims. Estimate of 250,000 to 400,000 visitors, besides the 80,000 permanent residents. Crowd pressed in the streets, constant pushing. With each staggering step, the patibulum shook violently over the back. With each stumble on the irregular stones, the wood sank more deeply into the bleeding wounds. Jesus fell. The Bible does not specify exactly how, many times, but ancient Christian tradition speaks of 3 documented falls. Each fall meant his total weight, plus the additional weight of the wooden beam, crushing the lacerated back against the hard stone ground. Impossible to cushion the fall with arms tied open across the beam, the face hitting directly on the stone, more trauma to the already bruised facial bones. On the third complete fall, the soldiers clinically perceived that he would not manage to arrive alive at the location. They requisitioned by force of Roman law a man from the watching crowd. Simon of Cyrene, city in present day. Libya, probably a Jew from the diaspora who had come for Passover. Mark identifies him as father of Alexander and Rufus, suggesting they later became known in the Christian community. They forced him to carry the cross the rest of the way, not out of humanitarian compassion, but out of pure Roman administrative efficiency. If Jesus died on the way, the public execution would completely lose its pedagogical effect of intimidation. When they finally arrived at Golgotha, which literally means place of the skull in Aramaic, they placed the heavy patibulum on the dirt ground. They laid Jesus on his back on the rough wood. They stretched his right arm along the horizontal beam, and then they brought the forged iron nails. Roman crucifixion nails discovered in archaeological excavations were between 13 and 18 centimeters in total length. Square and sharp point, thick shaft 5 to 7 millimeters in diameter, made specifically to pierce human bone without bending or breaking. The exact anatomical location of the perforation was not the open palms of the hands, as most historical artistic representations show. The palms of the hands do not possess bone structure capable of supporting the total weight of the hanging human body. The small metacarpal bones would rapidly break under tension, and the body would come loose from the cross. The anatomically correct point was the space of destot, a narrow region between the wrist bones called semiluna and capitate. Their pass concentrated the median nerve responsible for hand sensitivity and the radial artery that irrigates the entire extremity. When the iron nail violently pierces that specific point, it completely destroys the large caliber median nerve. The resulting pain is so intense and so beyond normal human capacity to process that, again, there exists no common word in language to adequately describe it. Medical scholars of pain use the technical term irreversible catastrophic neurological pain. The entire arm immediately enters violent, uncontrolled spasm. The fingers involuntarily contract with force. The hand permanently twists into rigid claw format. And that specific pain does not decrease with time, nor does it adapt. Completely destroyed nerve means constant and uninterrupted signal of maximum pain being transmitted to the brain without any pause. They did exactly the same procedure with the left arm. One more iron nail piercing the left wrist, one more median nerve completely destroyed. Now both arms in simultaneous permanent spasm. Then they lifted the horizontal patibulum with Jesus nailed to it and impacted it into the vertical stipe already permanently fixed in the rocky ground. The dry impact of the beam fitting into the prepared fitting caused severe additional trauma to the pierced wrists. The shoulder joints partially dislocated forward under the sudden weight of the unsupported hanging body. Fixing the feet remained. They bent the knees at an angle of approximately 120 degrees, placed the left foot over the right foot, and drove a single long iron nail piercing both heels or metatarsals against the vertical wooden beam. More important nerves destroyed, more permanent catastrophic pain radiating through the legs. The final anatomical position left the body completely suspended by the three unique points of metallic fixation. Knees semi-flexed at unnatural angle, arms stretched and open at approximately 60 degrees, total weight constantly pulling downward by gravity. And in that calculated position began the true medical process of death by crucifixion. Crucifixion kills slowly by irreversible progressive asphyxiation. When the body is hanging in the described position, the weight pulls the diaphragm down and severely compresses the lungs against the thoracic wall. Managing to inspire air inward is still difficult but possible with effort. The critical physiological problem is expiring. To manage to release the stale air from the full lungs, the condemned must violently push the entire body upward, transferring weight and simultaneously supporting on the nailed feet and nailed arms. Each minimal movement necessary to breathe means scrubbing the completely lacerated back against the rough vertical wood. It means placing additional direct pressure on the already destroyed nerves of the wrists and feet. Literally unbearable pain at each single breath necessary to continue alive. At the initial beginning, the person still has reserve of muscular strength to push repeatedly, breathes with extreme difficulty and pain, but manages to breathe minimally. With the slow passage of hours under the sun, the muscles enter complete extreme fatigue. Violent cramps begin in the tensioned calves, rise through the contracted thighs, reach the rigid abdomen, arrive at the oppressed chest, the entire body in painful involuntary contraction. And each time the person stops pushing upward from exhaustion, the lungs immediately begin filling with serous fluid. Progressive pulmonary edema, carbon dioxide accumulates dangerously in the non-oxygenated blood. Severe respiratory acidosis. The pH of the blood becomes critically acidic. The heart races into tachycardia. Dangerous cardiac arrhythmia begins. Jesus remained nailed, hanging on the cross at exactly 9 in the morning. Mark records the time with precision, third hour, in the Jewish system of dividing the day into periods. During the first 3 exposed hours, Jesus spoke 7 recorded times, extremely short words, broken phrases, because speaking any word required painfully pushing upward, expiring with force, forming words with the mouth, lowering again. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," said while the soldiers were still hammering the nails piercing his wrists. He did not wait to finish. The physical torture to spiritually forgive. He forgave during. To the thief crucified beside who recognized Jesus and asked to be remembered, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Immediate guarantee of eternal salvation, given at the exact moment of maximum physical agony. To Mary, his biological mother, and John, the beloved disciple, "Woman, behold your son, behold your mother," providing practical future care for her even while slowly suffocating. At exactly noon, the sun completely went out. It was not natural solar eclipse. The Jewish Passover always fell mathematically on the full moon of the month of Nisan, and solar eclipses only occur astronomically during the new moon phase. Physically impossible. But supernatural darkness covered all the inhabited earth for 3 complete and documented hours. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, abnormal, total darkness. In those 3 specific hours of darkness, something happened spiritually that no human being directly witnessed. The Bible records only the audible result. Jesus cried out in loud voice with force, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" My God, why have you forsaken me?" Theological scholars debate the exact meaning of that phrase, but there is an extremely important medical detail: shouting anything in loud and strong voice, when your lungs are progressively filling with fluid, when you are in advanced asphyxiation process, requires literally superhuman physical effort. Jesus had something spiritually too urgent to be whispered low. Minutes later, consciously knowing that everything was finally consummated, he said clearly, "I thirst." It was not merely passing discomfort of dry mouth, it was objective clinical sign of terminal hypovolemic shock final stage, severe extreme dehydration, critical loss of bodily fluids, thick and viscous blood no longer managing to adequately circulate through the vessels. They offered sour vinegar on a sponge at the tip of a long hyssop. Vinegar was common cheap drink of Roman soldiers, sour and acidic. Jesus minimally moistened the cracked lips, and then he declared in audible voice, "It is finished." 3 powerful words in the original Koine Greek, tetelestai, grammatical perfect tense. It means precisely something that was completely completed and whose effects remain permanently valid forever. It was not final defeat. It was triumphant announcement of mission perfectly accomplished. The absolutely final recorded phrase, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And he voluntarily bowed his head and gave up his spirit. The documented average time of survival in Roman crucifixion was 2 to 4 complete days. It depended on multiple factors: previous health of the condemned, specific severity of the previous flogging, climatic conditions during, available hydration. Some particularly physically strong men endured up to 5 entire days, hanging before finally dying. Jesus died in exactly 6 hours. Forensic physicians who carefully analyzed the complete sequence proposed that the specific immediate cause of death was traumatic cardiac rupture. The heart, under extreme physical stress of hours, beating in chaotic rhythm without pattern, without adequate oxygenation of the blood, literally tore internally. When that occurs anatomically, the pericardial sac around the heart rapidly fills with separated red blood and transparent serous fluid. That was exactly what the soldiers found when they pierced his right side with the long spear to confirm official death. John, direct eyewitness, records with notable medical precision, blood and water came out, not homogeneously mixed. First red blood, then separated transparent water, clinically perfectly consistent with hemopericardium caused by myocardial rupture. The soldiers routinely broke the legs of the crucified with heavy iron bars to accelerate death. Without support to push the body, complete terminal asphyxiation occurred in few minutes. They broke the legs of the two thieves crucified beside, but when they came to Jesus verifying, he was already provenly dead. And here is the profound theological irony that few perceive. The specific law of Passover recorded in Exodus chapter 12 expressly stated that no bone of the paschal lamb could be broken during preparation. Jesus died exactly at Passover as the substitute lamb, and no bone of his was broken. They removed the body from the cross before sunset, because the Jewish Sabbath was beginning at nightfall, and the law of Deuteronomy categorically prohibited leaving corpses exposed during the night. Joseph of Arimathea, rich member of the Sanhedrin, and Nicodemus, Pharisee, who had secretly visited Jesus, carefully wrapped the body in fine linen cloths with exactly 35 kilograms of expensive mixture of myrrh and aloes. They placed it in a new, never-used tomb carved in solid rock. They rolled a giant circular stone of more than 1 ton, completely sealing the entrance. Pilate officially authorized permanent Roman guard. 16 professional soldiers in alternating shifts of 4 men under legal penalty of immediate execution if they let any person steal the guarded body. Exactly 3 days later, the tomb was completely empty. Physicians who studied the crucifixion in detail estimate that the pain was so extreme that they invented an entirely new word to adequately describe it: excruciating. It comes from Latin ex, out of, and crux, cross. Pain so completely beyond the bearable that it needed its own exclusive term. Jesus could have avoided each single second. He could have called 12 legions of angels. He could have come down from the cross and annihilated everyone there. But he stayed. 6 hours nailed, slowly suffocating, because there was something that only that specific pain could purchase. 2,000 years later, we still try to understand the mathematics of it. How did 6 hours of suffering pay eternal debt? How did the death of one innocent man satisfy infinite justice? The answer does not fit in human logic. It only fits in love so radical that it chose the most brutal path when it could have chosen any other.